The purpose of this this event is just kind of talk a little bit about some of the things that are possible with Zendesk. First, I want to just kick off by mentioning our program. One of the great things about my job is that we give away free software to founders and startups. So you get access to Zendesk as part of the Segment program. It's for 6 months for free. So that's a great benefit. In addition, because of our great relationship with Segment, we also offer an additional 15% off your first contract after the free 6 months. So a little additional kicker at the end of the 6 months. So really great opportunity there. And actually there's Rose, so I'm gonna add her in. Okay. Next slide is, I'll let you guys take over.
Yeah, so in addition to what was just talked about with regards to our program, for those of you who might not know what Segment is just yet, Segment is a customer data infrastructure. It's a platform that allows you to use your data most effectively. So what we do is we allow you to collect your data from almost any type of first-party customer data source, whether it's your website, your mobile apps, your Salesforce data, and payment data from places like Stripe, or even customer data from places like Zendesk. You can bring that in into Segment, where it's unified into user records. If you can click once, unified into user records, and then it's brought in downstream into over 350 different integrations that we already have built in for you. So especially for startups, this is really fantastic because all you have to do is spend maybe an hour of your engineering time to set this up, and then all of your team members who want to try out different tools, who want to use new tools, who want to deprecate old tools, can really be empowered to change out their tools as they're growing. And don't have to bother engineers for upkeep and maintenance of those tools ongoing. Yeah.
Okay. So as I mentioned, from the Zendesk perspective, one of the things we want to talk about and share with you today was really just to take a look at what the possibilities are, especially when you're combining two powerful tools like Zendesk and Segment. So, my hope is that you'll come away from this presentation with a little bit of an inspiration of what's possible here. So our agenda is just a really quick peek at some of the things that I personally get excited about when thinking about setting up your customer experience, particularly with a tool like Zendesk. We'll talk about how to consolidate your communications with customers, reduce the number of support requests that you need to respond to, and then how to leverage data from other systems such as Segment to kind of provide that better customer experience. And if you think about it, Segment is really going to power a lot of the way that you approach your actual communication interaction with your customers. And that front line of interaction with the customers is where Zendesk comes into play. And so it's a really great relationship that these two software tools have together. As you think about Zendesk and our products, we do have two core pieces of software. The first is our Sales CRM. It's a product particularly for startups. I think works really well. Very simple, easy to use CRM. But the one that we're obviously known for is our customer support tool. So Zendesk is, I think, widely considered best in breed. It's been a great tool for a lot of startups over the past decade. Think about AirBnB, Uber, Slack, Lyft, Zoom, Peloton. A lot of the companies that have just grown and taken off in the last decade have been on Zendesk, and it's been a powerful tool for those use cases. Now, as you think about what's great about running a startup today is that you have a real competitive advantage versus startups, years ago, where you have access to so much more data today than you used to. And if you think about what that looks like for really large companies, like even Zendesk, it's hard. Historically, the biggest companies out there had access to this type of data, and now it's so easy to access no matter how big you are as a company. So you can get out and be flexible and get access to a lot of information. But with that, you also have some pain points that get created because there is so much data between you and ultimately your discussion with your customer, and that can get pretty complicated very quickly. And so one of the areas that we focus on at Zendesk is like, how are we centralizing communications? And I think that this is probably, from your customer engagement strategy, this is the most fundamental function of any of the tools that you use. And oftentimes what I've seen in my experience is that CRMs tend to focus more on data collection and on reporting, as opposed to really focusing on the stuff that I think Zendesk focuses on, which is how are you able to see messages coming from your customers and respond back? And that's what's made us such a powerful tool, is that focus on communication. And what that looks like here in Zendesk, and this is where we might differ from other tools, is that everything's happening in one unified view. So what you're looking at here is what we call our agent workspace. And you can send and receive messages from your customers regardless of how they're trying to communicate with you from one place. So you don't have to go into a separate chat tool or a separate phone system, a separate email tool to see and communicate with your customers. All of this is happening in one place. So what you see on the right is a variety of messages coming in from different channels. Each icon represents a different channel. So those are your incoming messages. And then at the bottom, you can see how easy it is to toggle from one communication form to the other. And that's all happening here in the same place. And the end result of that is this unified stream of conversation and showing every interaction you have with a customer. And in this example, you can see a chat coming in that's initiated by a customer. The rep is easily able to respond back to that chat. Then they can reach out to a colleague. In this case, it's Slack, but it also works via email. The colleague is still in Slack. Your agent is in Zendesk. Neither of them leave the tool, respective softwares they're using. And you can really provide a much better customer experience because you've got your entire team accessible to your support team when they're trying to respond to customer questions. And what happens here is the agents see the message in Slack, your shipping team in this case sees the message in Slack. They can respond in the thread and reply back, and that message shows up here in Zendesk without the agent leaving Zendesk, and the agent can then see that message and then respond back to the customer. And then the great thing here at the end is you can see the customer wants an email instead of having to wait for the chat response, and then says, okay, well, let's get an email, and then the agent can quickly switch over to email. And it's the same thing. You can easily switch over to phone without going to a separate app. It's all in one place. And so that's one of the areas that I think when you're thinking about your customer experience, remembering the importance of communicating and being able to effectively communicate. And sometimes that gets lost in tools. The next thing I want to talk about, and this is super relevant to startups and something that I have some personal experience with, and that's deflecting tickets. So, my first startup was in 2008, and this was really before Zendesk was much of a thing. And so at that time, when it came to answering customer questions, you had limited options. One was to just answer each question as it came in, or copy and paste email templates into your emails and then send them out. What I ended up doing was actually utilizing my blog from my first startup to respond to questions. And rather than, when I got a question coming in, if I knew I was going to get it several times, rather than responding to it each time, I would write a blog post and then link to the blog every time the question came in and sent that out. And unwittingly, it became a huge part of my my strategy of marketing the business online. So SEO started to go really well for our business, and that blog became one of the more widely read blogs in the industry. And mostly because I just didn't have a proper FAQ set up, and I was kind of using the blog for that. And so it's a good reminder. So when you're setting up your FAQ, I think that's one thing that I love to tell startups. It's part of your marketing, your content marketing strategy. So start, defining and publishing your FAQs early. You don't have to have it in a tool like Zendesk right away, but the first thing you can do is set up maybe even a shared Google Doc. Even if you don't want to put it up on a website, it might be easier to maintain and update that. The important thing is that you're continuing to add FAQs, you're adding content in there and growing that over time. On day one, you might only be able to think of 5 or 10, but once you start engaging with customers, that list of FAQs can grow longer and longer. And it's going to be a powerful ally in your content marketing strategy as you build it out on a website using a tool like Zendesk. And then the other advantage with our tool is that each article becomes its own searchable page, and that floods the web with this relevant content. And if you think about it today, most people don't go to company websites and then look for their FAQ and then type in a search. You're just leveraging Google. So if I wanted to know something about Zendesk, I'm just going to type in Zendesk and then the question I have, or if it's segment and the question I have. And so as you think about that, a really good FAQ is a great way for you to get good search results going in your SEO strategy. So keep that in mind. It's also useful in training new employees. And so you can have internal FAQs as well as externally facing FAQs. And so when your agents are answering questions, if it's a common question that comes in, there might be an internal FAQ that has like a list of steps that you need to take to resolve this, especially the more complex ones. And so that's a really useful tool, and it helps keep your team on the same page as you're growing your team, and you're no longer, as a founder, the only person answering the question. So think about that. And then the last, and this is kind of something that's interesting, and all kinds of possibilities with this, but it serves as the foundation of ticket deflection. And so what I mean by that is when customers come to your website, based on our research, 90% of the time, they expect to be able to resolve issues on their own. And deflection happens in a few ways. Your first line of defense is going to be that great FAQ, right? Come to the website, the FAQ's there. I don't need to bother anybody. I've got my question. Everybody's happy. Got my question answered. The next layer is with our answer bot on a chat. So someone might go in the FAQ and maybe search for something, or prior to searching, they may go and just say, I want to chat with somebody. And the first message is recognizable by our answer bot, and it can see that there's some FAQs that might answer that question, and it's going to push a response. We do the same thing with our email. So if you can set it up so there's an auto response that has potential questions that might answer. And if you set this up well, this allows you to deflect even more tickets, so that at the very end, after all of that, you're just left with a fraction of the support inquiries that actually need a human response. Zendesk comes out of the box with some basic built-in AI capabilities, but you can also integrate more powerful applications from third parties. So that's definitely available to you. And as customers begin searching your FAQ and submitting inquiries, the bot will suggest these potential resolutions, again, based on your FAQ library. I think it's important to set expectations here, as this is something that takes time to set up before it's really effective. That said, the bot will only improve over time, right? It'll learn, it'll get better, and that, especially as you add more information and train it. And then an important pro tip here when you're setting up and defining your FAQs, keep them precise. So broad questions with multi-part answers get really difficult for any kind of AI to parse out. But if you break it down to like, here's the most basic question, here's the most basic answer, it's going to be very effective in serving up relevant results. So as you think about your FAQs, don't get overly complex and have too much happening in a single question or answer. Like try and keep it pretty simple. And then the last section I like to cover that really gets me excited is working with data across multiple systems. And this is where Segment in particular is a very powerful ally of Zendesks. From my experience, one of the reasons I came to Zendesk is because as a founder implementing software tools, I was always trying to do everything in one system, particularly with my first startup, and learned pretty quickly that can be a bit of a disaster. And that's because there's not going to be a single tool that's going to do everything for you. And if you think about this, the software ecosystem today, there are so many powerful tools that are good at very specific things, and they also connect and work well together. And so I have this general philosophy to go out and get best in breed software tools and then find ways to connect them. And that's where there's a lot of powerful tools that help do that, Segment being one of them. With that, the way Zendesk approaches connecting information is our Sunshine data platform. It's not a platform where you're building applications on top of it. It's more of a platform that's collecting data, organizing it in a way that then makes it useful to your Zendesk tools. And so we're built on top of AWS. That information is getting connected and synced in real time. And it syncs both ways. So any information that is happening, any interactions, for example, in Segment that you're collecting from customers, those can show up here and can be displayed. And then also, if you ever want to make an update to a customer profile or something based on a conversation you're having with them in Zendesk, you can then make that update and push it back to other systems. In terms of the data, you can connect all kinds of data with Sunshine. So everything from expected use cases, like delivery information, order history, usage records, to very specific requirements for your own business. My favorite example is, Zipcar was an early adopter of Sunshine and figured out a way to set it up so that cars could actually log their own customer service requests. So you didn't need any human interaction for a car to come in and say, hey, I'm out of gas or something like that. So pretty fun use case that they developed there. And then of course, Segment plays into this really well. And I'll let you jump in on it.
Oh,
Actually,
yeah.
Sheldon might be good to speak to this one.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to this slide. So like Anand already said, essentially Segment has a suite of libraries and a bunch of different coding languages. JavaScript, Go, Java, Node is just a very small fraction of the number of integrations that Segment can support to pipe data in. And essentially you can add very few lines of code to your application. Imagine it's an e-commerce site and you have someone sign up for your email list, someone make a purchase. You can add something like an identify call here, and we can track our friend Peter Gibbons. I don't know if anyone's seen the movie Office Space, but if you look through the Segment documentation, you'll see about a dozen or so Office Space references. And we can, with just a few lines of code, add Peter's profile, as you can see on the right-hand side, into Zendesk. And this can capture all kinds of things. Essentially, we can tell what company Peter works for. We can tell what priority level that customer should be treated with, what type of account maybe that they have, if it's like premium or free or somewhere in between. You can add things like the time zone, and you can capture this information once and send it to Zendesk, as well as the 300 plus destinations that Anand mentioned. Additionally, you can track people's application interactions. So say our friend Peter comes on our website, he's reading through just a ton of articles. This will then show up in a Zendesk Sunshine event. So you can see just a little snippet here, one test event that I sent, and then something like article completed. But you can really add as much metadata as you want to make those events as granular as possible. And this data doesn't have to just go to Zendesk. It can go to things like Google Analytics, Salesforce, all kinds of applications. However, it's just this few simple lines of code, and Segment is converting the data and sending it wherever you want. Zendesk, of course, being a great example of that. And that's pretty much it for this slide.
Yeah, well, great. And of course, that information, once it comes into Zendesk, is typically it's organized in 3 areas, that profile information, the events, and then we also, if you're using any kind of communication tools outside of the ones that are built into Zendesk, you can also pipe that information as well. And Sunshine just kind of collects that, brings it all together, and makes it available to our tools. And the way that shows up is here is a good example of what that looks like. So you have, kind of your unified conversation in the middle of the screen, but then on the right, you've got a number of different cards that you can rotate between. And depending on the customer and what the conversation's about, different information can show here, and you can toggle between cards. So if you're working with different customer type of issues or different support teams, you might have different information showing here. But in this case, we have a custom object that was created that just displays the device info for this customer, and access to an external system where you can retrieve logs. Next to that, below that, you've got a customer profile that's editable and that you can push data back into the other systems. And then, of course, the event timeline. So any type of interaction the customer's had with the product is brought in here and shown here. So this is kind of an example of what all that looks like. And I think that if you think about all the possibilities, there's so many different things you can do here, and really putting this information at the disposal of your agents when they're serving your customers, it really can help kind of power up that experience that you can provide for them. So all this stuff gets me super, super excited. So, and then next slide, we talk a little bit about use cases.
So there are a lot of ways that you can use Segment and Zendesk together. As Sheldon mentioned, it's a really great way of getting really robust information, really robust data into your Zendesk instance. Segment, you can think about it as a way to not only collect data really easily, but also collect really good data and keep that data clean over time too. It's also a very easy way for you to build not just one-way streets, but also allow you to bring data into Segment, then send it to multiple places, and then even send data from those places back through Segment into other places. So for example, a data warehouse, or to Slack, or to a number of other integrations that you might want to use. And so just a couple of highlights here. We have really great ways to use Zendesk with Segment to break down data silos, particularly between like your sales and support teams. And I'm going to throw marketing in there too. So that way you have access to and visibility into all of your data. It also allows you to identify and prioritize high value support tickets because of all of that additional data that you have through your Segment implementation. It also allows you to easily add context to your Zendesk data, or use your Zendesk data a little bit more easily in other tools. Particularly, for example, at Segment, we have this set up, and we feed all of our customer data into Zendesk, and then from there, it comes back through Segment and then goes to our data warehouse. And that's where we can query against that. We can see what kinds of trends are happening, and double click on certain things that we're seeing. If you want to learn a little bit more about some of these use cases, I did want to call out segment.com/recipes, where you can check out how to do some of these, and it'll give you step-by-step instructions. I put some screenshots of that over on the right-hand side. Yeah, so just wanted to call attention.
Awesome. Awesome.
And in addition, if you go to the next slide, if you're interested in using Segment with Zendesk, as Brad mentioned, there is the Zendesk startup program. There's also the Segment startup program. If you're an early stage startup, you can get 50K in Segment credits, as well as mentorship and best practice sessions. And then you also get a whole deal book at Segment, which includes Zendesk's offer, as well as almost 40 other different partner programs that you can put together. That way you are collecting your data, and then you're also using your data in a pretty cool stack for cheap or for free. And then finally, with the mentorship, you know how to use your data properly and understand your data. So if you're interested in applying for that, you can apply at bit.ly/ZD-OH-21 for Zendesk Office Hour 21.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's a great program. I mean, I can say from our perspective at Zendesk, we get a ton of companies coming over from the Segment for Startups program, and it's a really great relationship here.